kingdom of Ilomi. Life revolved around a mighty river that connected villages, traders, and families. The river was more than a source of water. It was the lifeline of the kingdom. Every morning before sunrise, wooden boats carried merchants, fishermen, and travelers across its calm waters to distant markets and neighboring lands. Among these traders was a young woman named Abeni and her hard-working mother. They were known throughout the region for their honesty, kindness, and dedication. Though they lived a simple life, they never lacked respect from those around them. Together, they traveled regularly between kingdoms, buying and selling goods to support their family. Each market day began before dawn. As the rest of the village slept, Abeni and her mother carefully packed their baskets with cloth, spices, vegetables, and other valuable goods. They would then make their way to the busy riverbank, where traders gathered in anticipation of another journey. One beautiful morning, they boarded a large wooden trading boat alongside dozens of other merchants. As the boat drifted across the peaceful river, laughter and conversation filled the air. Traders exchanged stories about their travels. Children listened with curiosity, and the gentle morning breeze carried the promise of a successful day ahead. Abeni enjoyed these journeys and often admired the beauty of the river that connected so many lives. After several hours, the boat arrived at a neighboring kingdom known for its thriving marketplace. The streets were already crowded with merchants and customers from different lands. Colorful fabrics hung from market stalls. Baskets overflowed with fresh produce, and the sounds of bargaining echoed through the busy square. Throughout the day, Abeni welcomed customers with a warm smile and treated everyone with kindness. Her gentle nature and respectful manner made her one of the most admired traders in the marketplace. Many people returned to her stall not only for her goods, but also for the warmth she showed to everyone she met. But on that same day, another pair of eyes noticed Abeni. Prince Adewale, the king's only son, had arrived at the market with his royal guards. As he moved through the crowd, his attention suddenly fell on the young trader. Something about Abeni immediately captured his interest. From that moment, he found it difficult to look away. As the sun slowly began to set, traders packed their remaining goods and prepared for the journey home. Satisfied with the day's success, Abeni and her mother gathered their baskets and headed back toward the river. Unaware of the prince's lingering gaze, they walked peacefully through the fading light. Neither of them knew that this ordinary market day was about to become the beginning of a story that would change not only their lives, but the fate of an entire kingdom. As night fell over the kingdom, Abeni returned home unaware that someone powerful could not stop thinking about her. Inside the royal palace, Prince Adewale sat alone. Though many hours had passed since the market closed, her face remained in his thoughts. What began as simple curiosity was slowly turning into an obsession. The following market day, Prince Adewale returned to the marketplace. But this time, he was not there to inspect trade or represent the king. He came for one reason alone. He wanted to see Abeni again. From a distance, the prince watched Abeni as she worked. He noticed the way she welcomed customers and the kindness she showed to everyone around her. The more he watched, the more determined he became to learn everything about her. Soon, watching from a distance was no longer enough. The prince began asking questions about Abeni. He wanted to know where she came from, who her family was, and why so many people spoke highly of her. With every answer he received, his interest in her grew even stronger. For the first time, Abeni noticed the prince watching her. Their eyes met for only a brief moment before she returned to her work. To Abeni, it meant very little, but to the prince, that single glance meant everything. As the day came to an end, Abeni and her mother packed their goods and prepared for the journey home. But this time, the prince did not simply watch from the marketplace. He followed them from a distance, determined to learn more about the young trader who had captured his attention. Before long, the prince had learned more about Abeni than she could ever imagine. He discovered where she lived, how she earned her living, and the river route she traveled every market day. With each new piece of information, his fascination grew stronger. What had started as curiosity was slowly becoming an obsession. As they made their way home, Abeni's mother could not shake a feeling of unease. She had noticed the prince appearing too often and watching her daughter too closely. While Abeni thought little of it, her mother feared that the attention of a powerful prince rarely brought peace. And deep in her heart, she sensed that trouble was drawing near. As the weeks passed, Prince Adewale grew tired of watching Abeni from a distance. He wanted to speak to her himself. So on the next market day, he walked directly to her stall. Many traders stepped aside in surprise as the prince approached, wondering what business he could possibly have with a simple trader. But while many people would have been overwhelmed by the attention of a prince, Abeni simply continued her work. She greeted him politely and attended to his questions before returning her attention to her customers. To her, he was no different from any other person who visited her stall. Market day after market day, the prince kept returning to Abeni's stall. Soon, people throughout the marketplace began to notice. Some whispered that he admired her beauty, while others wondered why a prince spent so much time among ordinary traders. Everywhere he went, curious eyes followed him. But Abeni paid little attention to the gossip around her. Her focus remained on her work and helping her mother. Meanwhile, Abeni's mother grew increasingly uneasy. What others saw as admiration, she saw as a warning, and a feeling of concern settled deep within her heart. Believing that wealth could win Abeni's affection, the prince began arriving with expensive gifts. Fine fabrics, beautiful beads, and valuable treasures were placed before her. Many people would have considered such gifts a great honor, and the traders watched eagerly to see how she would react. Yet Abeni remained humble and unmoved. She appreciated the prince's kindness, but never encouraged his attention. She treated him with the same respect she showed everyone else. The more she kept her distance, the more frustrated the prince became. For the first time in his life, he could not get what he wanted. As the days passed, the prince's frustration continued to grow. No matter what he did, Abeni remained focused on her work and her family. Slowly, the admiration that had first drawn him to her began to change. A dangerous bitterness started to take root in his heart, replacing patience with anger. That evening, the prince watched Abeni and her mother make their usual journey home along the river route. As he stood alone beneath the fading light of the setting sun, A troubling idea entered his mind. If Abeni would not come to him willingly, he would find another way. And as darkness settled over the kingdom, fate itself seemed to grow silent. A few days later, Abeni and her mother set out once again for the market. The journey seemed no different from any other. The river flowed peacefully beside them, and traders filled the path with conversation and laughter. Yet beneath the calm atmosphere, an uneasy feeling lingered in the air. Unknown to them, someone had been watching their movements and waiting for the right moment. And with every step they took, danger drew closer. As they continued their journey home, Abeni walked a little ahead of her mother along the narrow riverside path. The day's trading had been successful, and their baskets were heavy with goods and earnings. For a brief moment, her mother stopped to adjust her load and catch her breath. Neither of them realized that this small separation would soon change their lives forever. After a while, Abeni noticed the path had grown strangely quiet. She stopped and looked behind her. Her mother was nowhere in sight. For the first time that day, a feeling of unease settled over her. The wind seemed different, and the silence around her felt unnatural. Something did not feel right. As Abeni stood alone on the path, a figure suddenly emerged from the trees. To her shock, it was Prince Adewale. She had not expected to see him there, far from the marketplace and away from the crowds. In that moment, Abeni understood that his repeated appearances had never been a coincidence, and a deep sense of fear settled in her heart. That day, Abeni's life changed forever. The journey that had begun like any other ended in heartbreak. The cheerful young trader, who had left for the market that morning, would never return home the same person. And as dark clouds gathered over the river, a painful chapter of her story began. When her mother finally found her, she immediately knew that something terrible had happened. Abeni could barely speak. The joy that once filled her eyes had disappeared, replaced by sadness and silence. With a heavy heart, her mother gathered their belongings and led her daughter home, fearing that their lives had changed forever. Weeks passed, but Abeni was no longer the same. She spoke less, smiled less, and spent much of her time alone. Her mother watched with growing concern, hoping that time would heal her daughter's pain. But another truth was slowly beginning to reveal itself, one that neither of them could ignore. Then came the news that neither of them had expected. Abeni was carrying a child. Fear and uncertainty filled their hearts as they struggled to understand what the future would hold. But while Abeni worried about the days ahead, her mother knew there was one person who needed to hear the truth. Prince Adewale. Determined to protect her daughter, Abeni's mother went to the royal palace and demanded justice. She stood before Prince Adewale and asked him to accept responsibility for what had happened. Abeni stood beside her, hoping he would do the right thing. To their shock, Prince Adewale denied everything. He refused to acknowledge either Abeni or the child she carried. Heartbroken and disappointed, Abeni and her mother left the palace knowing they would receive no help from him. Although the prince
The sunset
had
is
abandoned
beautiful
them,
tonight.
life continued.
It is a blessing.
The months passed, and
Look at the
Abeni's
canoes.
pregnancy became
The river
more
is life
visible.
for us.
Despite their
The
struggles,
sunset is beautiful
she
tonight.
and her mother
It is a
continued their
blessing.
trading journeys
Look at the
across the river,
canoes.
determined
The
to
river is
survive.
life for us.
One morning, Despite being heavily pregnant, Abeni joined her mother on another journey across the river. Many passengers looked at her with concern, wondering why she was still traveling so close to her due date. Halfway through the journey, Abeni suddenly felt sharp pains. At first she tried to remain calm, but the pains continued to grow stronger. Soon everyone on the boat realized that the child was about to be born. Before they reached the shore, as fear spread among the passengers, several women rushed
Abeni.
to help
We're
Abeni.
here. It hurts
Her
so much!
mother stayed by her side while the
herbs
boat
are ready.
drifted across
Hold on,
the
my
river.
child.
Everyone prayed that
Breathe,
both
Abeni.
mother
We're
and
here.
child
It
would
hurts
be
so
safe.
much!
Just
We
when
must
hope
help her.
seemed to be
The herbs
fading,
are ready.
the wind stopped
Hold on, my child.
and the river became still. A brilliant light appeared upon the water, and Yemoja rose from the river. Looking upon Abeni with compassion, she blessed her and promised that both mother and child would be protected. With Yemoja's blessing, Abeni found the strength she needed. Soon a healthy baby girl was born upon the river. Joy filled the boat as the passengers celebrated the miracle. Before leaving, Yemoja declared that the child had been born under her protection and must never forget the waters that welcomed her into the world. The news of the miraculous river birth quickly spread throughout the kingdom. Villagers gathered to welcome Abeni's newborn daughter, and many believed the child was special because she had been born under Yemoja's blessing. People spoke of her with wonder, believing that her life was connected to a greater destiny. As the days passed, the family prepared for the child's naming ceremony. Relatives, friends, and neighbors came together to celebrate the newborn, while everyone rejoiced and remembered the miracle that had taken place upon the river. The importance of Yemoja's blessing slowly began to fade from their minds. As the ceremony ended, some of the passengers who had witnessed the river birth reminded the family about Yemoja's blessing. They repeated the words spoken on the river and warned that the child should never forget the protection she had received. However, many dismissed the warning, believing she would grow up like any other child. A few weeks later, the child suddenly became ill. At first, Abeni and her mother thought it was a common sickness. But as the days passed, the baby failed to improve, and fear slowly began to take hold of the family. Desperate to save the child, no matter what they did, her condition continued to worsen. Abeni and her mother searched for help wherever they could find it. They visited respected healers and sought advice from village elders. Everyone tried to help, but the child's condition remained unchanged. The answer they needed seemed farther away than ever. As the weeks passed, the family grew more worried. Abeni spent many sleepless nights caring for her daughter and praying for a miracle. Her mother watched helplessly as they ran out of answers, wondering what could be causing the mysterious illness. Just as hope began to fade, a respected elder came to visit. After hearing the story and examining the child, she remembered the day of the river birth and the blessing that had accompanied it. She advised Abeni and her mother to take the child to the riverside shrine, where the servants of Yemoja might reveal the truth. Following the elder's advice, they carried the child to the shrine. There, the white-clad devotees listened carefully before explaining what had been forgotten. The child had been born under Yemoja's protection and should have been presented properly in gratitude for that blessing. At last, Abeni and her mother understood their mistake. and the mystery behind the child's illness was finally revealed. After revealing the truth, the devotees explained that Yemoja had protected both Abeni and her child during the river birth. They instructed the family to properly honor the blessing and continue showing gratitude at the shrine. Determined to make things right, Abeni and her mother promised to follow every instruction. The next morning, Abeni and her mother returned to the shrine with the child. They presented her before the sacred river and thanked Yemoja for her protection. The devotees offered prayers and blessings, and for the first time since the illness began, Abeni felt hope return to her heart. Only a few days later, the child began to recover. She grew calmer and stronger with each passing day, and the fear that had filled the family slowly faded away. Abeni and her mother finally realized that Yemoja's blessing had never left the child. Before long, news of the recovery spread throughout the village. People remembered the miraculous river birth and began speaking of the child with admiration and respect. Many believed she had been chosen for a special purpose, while others praised Yemoja for protecting her. As the months passed, stories of the river child traveled far beyond the village. Merchants, travelers, and elders shared the tale wherever they went. Eventually, the story reached the royal palace, where even the king became curious about the child born under Yemoja's blessing. Reports of the child's miraculous birth and recovery spread throughout the kingdom. The royal messengers traveled to Abeni's village and listened carefully to the villagers. They learned about the river birth, Yemoja's blessing, and the child's recovery. But they also discovered that the child's mother was Abeni, the same woman who had once sought justice from Prince Adewale. The revelation left them stunned. When the messengers returned to the palace, they told the king everything they had learned. The court was shocked to discover that the river child was believed to be Prince Adewale's daughter. As silence filled the throne room, the king realized that the child everyone was talking about might be his own granddaughter, and that a long-hidden truth was finally coming to light. As stories of the river child spread across the kingdom, a strange unrest began to affect the land. Villagers spoke of unusual troubles, and concern grew from one community to another. Before long, the elders feared that a deeper problem was disturbing the kingdom's peace. Troubled by these events, the elders met with the king and shared reports from across the kingdom. After listening carefully, the oldest elder warned that the unrest might be connected to a truth that had long been ignored, leaving the king eager to learn more. Seeking answers, the elders traveled to the riverside shrine and consulted the white-clad devotees. There, they learned that the child blessed by Yemoja had not been fully acknowledged, and that the truth surrounding her birth remained hidden. The elders realized that the kingdom's troubles might be connected to the river child.
Great
When
King,
they returned
I bring
to
words
the
of unity.
palace, the
Our
elders
enemies struggle.
delivered the
We must stand
shrine's
together.
message.
Your words
They
carry weight.
explained
Speak on. We
that
shall forge
peace
this
could not
alliance.
fully
Let the council
return
prepare. Great King,
until the
I bring
river
words of
child
unity.
was
Our enemies
recognized
circle. We
and
must
her
stand together.
connection
Your
to
words
the
carry
royal
weight. Speak on.
family acknowledged.
We shall forge this
The
alliance.
king
Let the
understood
council
that
prepare.
he could no longer ignore the truth. After a night of reflection, the king made his decision. He summoned his most trusted messengers and ordered them to find Abeni and the child born upon the river. For the first time, The king was searching not for a stranger, but for the granddaughter he had never known. After many days of travel, the royal messengers arrived at Abeni's village. They delivered the king's invitation, asking Abeni and her daughter to come to the palace. Shocked by the message, Abeni and her mother struggled to believe that the royal family was finally calling for the river child. Following careful consideration, Abeni agreed to go. Accompanied by her mother, her daughter, and the royal messengers, she left the village and began the long journey to the palace. As they traveled, she wondered whether the future would bring justice, healing, or new challenges. The fate of the kingdom and the fate of the river child were forever connected. The throne room fell silent as the king looked upon Abeni and the river child. As he reflected on years of unanswered questions, he turned his attention to Prince Adewale. The elders watched closely, knowing that the future of the kingdom depended on the truth finally being revealed. Before the entire royal court, the king confronted Prince Adewale and demanded answers. The prince stood in silence as the weight of his actions settled upon him. For the first time, he realized that he could no longer escape the past. Unable to hide the truth any longer, Prince Adewale confessed. He admitted that Abeni had spoken the truth and acknowledged the river child as his daughter. The revelation shocked the court. While Abeni quietly witnessed the moment she had waited years to see, the king was deeply disappointed by his son's actions. He declared that no one, not even a prince, was above justice. Before the entire kingdom, he acknowledged the river child as a member of the royal family and promised that the wrong done to Abeni would never again be ignored. Following the king's judgment, the chiefs and elders formally welcomed the river child into the royal family. Blessings and prayers were offered for her future, and many felt that a heavy burden was finally being lifted from the kingdom. Hope began to replace fear and uncertainty. In
Good
the
day,
weeks
sister.
that
Your mangoes
followed,
look ripe.
peace
Fresh
slowly
from the fields,
returned
Elder. A good
to the
harvest.
land.
Join us,
The
my friend.
unrest
We were
that
just
had
talking.
troubled the kingdom
pleasure.
faded away.
How is everyone?
And many believed
Good day,
that
sister.
acknowledging
Your mangoes
the
look
truth
ripe.
had
Fresh
restored
from the fields,
balance.
Elder. A good
The people
harvest.
gave
Join
thanks
us, my
to
friend. We were
Yemoja
just
for
talking.
guiding the
With
kingdom
pleasure.
back
How is
toward
everyone?
harmony. Although Prince Adewale had confessed, many felt that his heart remained unchanged. The elders urged him to seek forgiveness and make peace with the river that had protected his daughter, but pride still lingered within him. Meanwhile, the sacred river remained silent and watchful. Not long afterward, Prince Adewale set out on a journey across the same river where his daughter had been born. A sudden storm rose from the waters, and the elders later said that Yemoja herself had delivered judgment. When the storm passed, the prince was gone. From that day forward, the people remembered that no one could escape the consequences of their actions, while the river child continued to guide the kingdom into an age of peace and prosperity. Many years after Yemoja delivered judgment upon the river, the people continued to tell the story of the river child. Elders gathered children beside the sacred waters and shared the lessons of truth, justice, and Yemoja's blessing. With each passing generation, the legend remained alive in the hearts of the people. As time passed, the river child grew into a wise and respected young woman, loved by the people and honored by the royal family. She became known for promoting fairness, understanding, and peace. Many believed that Yemoja's blessing guided her throughout her life. One evening, she returned to the sacred river where her journey had begun. Standing beside the water, she reflected on her mother's courage, Yemoja's protection, and the truth that had restored peace to the kingdom. Filled with gratitude, she realized how deeply the river had shaped her destiny. As she stood by the river, the waters suddenly glowed with blue and golden light. Yemoja appeared once again and praised the young woman for honoring the blessing she had been given. She reminded her that she had brought peace, truth, and hope to the kingdom. After receiving Yemoja's final blessing, the river child bowed in gratitude as the goddess slowly disappeared into the waters. At sunrise, the river child looked across the peaceful kingdom she had helped unite. The struggles of the past had become lessons for future generations. The people prospered, and the story of the river child continued to be told beside fires, beneath village trees, and along the riverbanks. Her legacy became a symbol of courage, truth, justice, and Yemoja's blessing. The sacred river continued to flow through the land, carrying the memories of the past and the promise of a better future. Though many years passed, the people never forgot the story that had changed their kingdom forever. They believed that the river remembered every journey. From that day forward, the people honored the river and lived by the lessons it had taught them. The kingdom flourished in peace and prosperity, every choice and every destiny. And although Yemoja was rarely seen again, her presence was felt wherever the river flowed. The elders taught that as long as the people respected the river and lived with honesty in their hearts, Yemoja's blessing would remain upon the land forever.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share. Subscribe for more African stories. See you in the next one.